Hey guys, Scott here, and let's talk about the Rune nerf. X Rune has basically been a staple slowdown perk for over 3 years, and today the developers pretty much announced its time of death. If you want a quick impression from me, I'll say this is a great change, but it is done kind of at the wrong time. It needed to happen in concurrence with a change to how fast games are able to progress, and the fact that it didn't is going to make a lot of people upset. Don't get me wrong, I hate having to use Ruin on some killers just as much as I hate how fast some games can go, so removing it would not bother me at all if the other issue was addressed, but it wasn't. That being said, let's actually get into the depths of it here. So the new ruin basically acts as an automatic regression the second the survivor stops touching the generator. Now, in theory, this is actually a cool idea. It encourages killer and survivor interaction rather than just being a passive bonus for the killer. The killer is now rewarded even more for having map pressure and getting people off gens just by being nearby. Anything that encourages the killer and the survivor to interact more is a good change in my opinion. Still, the developers listed one of the main reasons for nerfing the perk as, where is it? The passive nature of the gameplay pressure it provides means that there is a huge amount of potential with very little risk or effort on behalf of the killer. Now, while that is true, I don't really view that as a problem. You can insert a number of survivor perks or items in that sentence, and it would seem hypocritical. Like, botany knowledge provides a large amount of bonus healing speed passively. Toolboxes provide a large amount of repair speed passively. Like, there's no interaction there, and yet they're still in the game and not listed as a problem, so I think that's kind of a weak justification for a nerf. Another reason they listed for a nerf was it was massively overused at red ranks. I believe they said it was, 80%. At around 80% occurrence. But again, I think that is also a weak justification. Just because something is overused does not imply it was overpowered. If the developers removed the ability for killers to hear sound and tied that to a perk instead, people would overwhelmingly use it to fix what they perceive to be a massive flaw with the mechanics of the game itself. In this case, most people believe the speed of the games are too fast, so they use a perk that helps them, remedy what they perceive to be a developer error. As for me personally, I don't like the change that much, at least with this state of the game. The thing is, for me, Rune isn't really a necessary perk to win to win games. It's needed to allow me to play nice. For those who watch me, I try my hardest to play as nice as possible while still eventually winning the match. Rune, a lot of the time, allows me to go for those 10, 11, 12 hook games and ensure everyone has a fair chance to actually play. You simply do not have enough time as killer to hook people 12 times without some sort of significant game delay. It's impossible. Because of the change, I'm going to have to play sweatier and more like a dick now if I still want to win. I know this sounds like some 500 confirmed kills Navy SEALs copy pasta shit, but I'm telling you, forcing me to play sweaty and act like a dick more is going to be extremely unfun for the other side. There's going to be more slugging, patrolling, and tunneling because the amount of time available in the game is about to shrink. But let's actually look at why Rune is needed past the simple I need it to slow the game down more, because I think the situation is more complex than that. Rune is such a strange perk. Like, you would think you'd want to use it against extremely talented and optimal Survive with Friends teams, but the truth is, Rune is basically useless against those groups. They can hit skill checks and they know totem spawns. But on the flip side, you'd think you wouldn't need Rune against mediocre teams because they're just mediocre players and they'll go down fast, and yet this is where Rune is actually the most important. The thing is, you don't have to be good to hold M1 on a generator. Hitting consistent great skill checks is definitely harder, but without Rune, a guy with 10 minutes in the game can just hold one on a gen until it's done. And I think therein lies the main problem. The main reason I use Rune circles back to the biggest problem with the game, which I just made a video about, and that's the map design. I use Rune because I'm gonna get maps that are too big. It's as simple as that. If I knew I was gonna get Coal Tower, Wrecker's Yard, like Father Campbell's Chapel, or any of the small maps in the game, I would never use Rune again. In fact, the new Rune on these maps would be really good because I could physically threaten people off gens in a quick fashion, which would cause them to start regressing immediately. However, there are maps like Red Forest where it takes literally half a generator to just walk to the other side of the map. And that's where I think Rune is almost a requirement on lower tier killers, especially if they have no movement abilities. Obviously, killers like Billy and Nurse can maintain the map pressure anywhere, but for everyone else, it doesn't matter how good you are at killer if you cannot even physically get to a generator before it's completed. And I think that's the entire point of Rune for me anyway. It's to make up for the time you are helpless simply walking to other places. It's a passive effect that band-aids shitty map design. I don't think it's a problem actually with the gen speeds. People always say slow down the gens. I don't think that's the solution. The entire dynamic of the speed of the game should be based on the interaction with the killer and the survivor. If the survivor cannot repair gens if the killer is threatening it, or the survivor has to rescue someone off a hook or revive a slug or something like that. If maps were small enough to allow the killer to actually maintain this pressure without a massive movement speed ability, Rune wouldn't even be needed in the first place. So, if this change came with a patch that fixed these issues with maps, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. However, it came with a patch that addressed nothing about these issues, so it comes off as like a short-sighted attempt to ease the experience for newer survivors. You can tell from watching my videos I lean towards survivor opinions more despite being a killer main, but I do not think this is a good idea. I know I'll be fine, but I literally play this game for a living, and that's a completely unreasonable standard to have. I would expect the average killer to absolutely hate this change because it just speeds up the game even more in a time where games, have the potential to be very, very fast. And don't get me wrong, I see the other side too. I watch VODs of survivors I go against all the time failing to hit rune skill checks and getting really frustrated. I get it. It's boring and it's annoying, of course. But killers don't want to have to use rune either. In fact, most of us hate rune. We just feel it's a necessary evil a lot of the time due to maps making it impossible for us to actually pressure people off gens. And to remove that small safety net we had without addressing anything else is not a very well thought out idea, at all. The new rune itself is interesting, but it's also an idea that's kind of hard to balance. As a hex perk, it's too weak. It only really has strength towards the end game when gens are probably going to be closer together, but by that time it's probably going to be gone. But as a regular perk, it's too strong. I would either buff the regression and keep it a hex, or nerf the regression and make it a regular perk, but even then you would have to compare it to something like Surge, which would just be objectively worse. I don't know. The whole thing is kind of a mess. And I know there might be some justification to these changes based on the killer kill rates and stuff like that, but I need to make it very clear. Those stats are worthless. You can draw absolutely no information that is usable in a balancing fashion from those stats. By those stats, Nurse is the worst killer in the game, which is obviously not true. And those stats on red rank games include this broken-ass Survive with Friends matchmaking where you can have one rank 1 guy and 3 rank 20 guys in a Survive with Friends, and the game classifies that now as a red rank game, and now you're balancing things off of that when the other guys have no idea. Please do not use those stats at all in terms of balancing. The only things that you can actually learn from those stats are things like Survive with Friends rates, because that's not something that's up to debate. It's just simply this is how many people are in a group at this time. It doesn't have any other variables where kill rates and things like that and maps and stuff like that all have so many variables, and it's based off of a ranking system that doesn't even make sense to begin with. So please do not use those stats to try to justify things. But overall, I think that's all I got for now. I know this is not a very exciting video, very exciting background we got here, but I wanted to make one quickly to give my opinions on this. Mostly so when people ask, I can lengthen this in my chat and not have to repeat this 8,000 times. But yeah, that's it. Overall, not a good idea right now. I like the idea in general, but it needs to be in a world where the maps are smaller and killers are able to pressure the gens more, because that's where the fun is and that's where the game delay is, getting people off gens. If the map is the size of a planet, you can't really do that very much, and that's where Rune comes in, and that's why I think it's currently a necessary evil. The new Rune does nothing to alleviate that issue at all. It really only helps towards the end of the game, where it's probably going to be destroyed anyway. So overall, very, very bad idea. Yeah, it's just not good. I think that is it. Oh shit! Yeah, I forgot. Fucking Oni is confirmed to get his flick back. So actually, it's the best patch ever.